Some contracts are signed in gold, but this one was signed in time. And for one to win, everyone had to die.
Have you ever heard of an investment plan so dark, so diabolical, that it practically incentivized murder? It sounds like something straight out of a gothic horror novel. But I assure you, it was very, very real. This is the story of the Tontine, the financial scheme that turned friends into rivals, family into foes, and life itself into a high-stakes, winner-take-all gamble. It's a chilling tale of greed, suspicion, and the surprising ways money can corrupt the human soul. The year is 1653 in France, under the reign of the young King Louis XIV, is teetering on the brink of bankruptcy. Decades of war, lavish spending by the monarchy, and a deeply flawed tax system had bled the royal treasury dry. The Sun King's finance minister, Cardinal Mazarin, was in a desperate search for a solution. Any solution to refill the state's empty coffers without further enraging an already overtaxed populace. Into this scene of fiscal crisis stepped an Italian banker named Lorenzo de Tonti. He was a man with a past, a political exile from Naples, but he arrived in Paris with a revolutionary idea, an ingenious proposal that promised to solve the king's money problems once and for all. Tonti presented his plan to the cardinal, a scheme he called the Tontine. So how did this strange and morbid system actually work? The concept was deceptively simple. A group of people, the investors, would pool their money together into a common fund managed by the state or a private entity. In return, each investor or nominee would receive an annual dividend, a share of the interest generated by the total capital. Here's the crucial twist. As each member of the group passed away, their share of the annual dividend wasn't inherited by their family. Instead, it was redistributed among the surviving members. With each death, the pot of annual income grew for those who remained. The pool of survivors would shrink year by year, death by death, while their individual payouts would swell. This process would continue until only one last person was left standing. This final survivor, the ultimate winner of this grim lottery, would inherit the entire capital fund.
The first few years are easy, but then the names start to be crossed off the list.
It was a life insurance policy in reverse, a financial instrument where you literally bet on your own longevity against everyone else's. Imagine the psychological pressure. You're not just an investor. You're a contestant in a decades-long marathon of survival. Every cough from a fellow member, every report of a minor illness, would spark a flicker of morbid hope. You'd find yourself scrutinizing the health of your fellow investors, perhaps even your friends and neighbors who had joined the same scheme. A healthy diet, a safe lifestyle, these were not just personal choices anymore. They were strategic moves in a financial game of chess where the ultimate prize was a fortune. The Tontine turned the natural course of life and death into a spectator sport, one where you were both the player and the prize. The longer you lived, the richer you got. It was a system that played directly on two of the most powerful human motivators, greed and the fear of death. Initially, the French Parliament was horrified. They rejected Tonti's proposal, branding it immoral and macabre. The idea of citizens profiting directly from the deaths of their countrymen seemed utterly ghoulish. It was seen as a state-sanctioned gamble, on human life, a mechanism that could poison social relationships and sow discord. The Parliament argued that it would create an environment of suspicion and paranoia, where every death would be viewed with suspicion. For a time, it seemed Tonti's idea was dead in the water, a curious but ultimately rejected footnote in financial history. But desperate times call for desperate measures. Decades later, with France's financial situation even more dire, King Louis XIV, now in full control of his kingdom, decided to resurrect the plan. In 1689, the first official state tontine was launched. The need for cash had finally outweighed the moral objections. The tontine's allure was undeniable. It offered the promise of a secure, ever-increasing income for life, and the tantalizing possibility of a massive jackpot at the end. For the government, it was a dream come true. They got a huge lump sum of cash up front and only had to pay out interest, a liability that would decrease over time as investors died off. It was a far more palatable way to raise funds than imposing new, unpopular taxes. The public flocked to participate. People of all classes, from wealthy aristocrats to modest merchants, rushed to buy shares. Parents would enroll their children at birth, carefully selecting the healthiest-looking babies, hoping to give them a head start in this lifelong competition. Entire families would invest, creating intricate webs of intra-family rivalry.
The law had to step in, not because of the murders, because the wrong people were getting rich.
The tontine became a social phenomenon, a national obsession that swept across France and soon the rest of Europe. But as the money flowed, so did the darkness. The tontine's inherent structure created a breeding ground for suspicion and foul play. As the pool of survivors dwindled and the stakes grew higher, the temptation for nefarious deeds became almost unbearable. Whispers and rumors of foul play became commonplace. Did old Monsieur Dubois really die from a sudden fever? Or was his medicine tampered with? Was the unfortunate drowning of young Mademoiselle Lefebvre truly an accident? The scheme transformed ordinary people into amateur detectives and potential suspects. Every premature demise of a fellow member was a financial windfall for the survivors, creating a powerful and dangerous incentive for murder. The most infamous case that brought the dark side of the tontine into the public consciousness was that of the tontine fiend, a woman named Marguerite de Tonti. She was a brilliant but utterly ruthless figure in 18th century Parisian society. She allegedly bought shares in a tontine, naming several nominees who were old, infirm, or in poor health. Her strategy was simple: wait for them to die and collect the increased dividends. But according to the scandalous rumors that swirled around her, she wasn't content to simply wait. It was said she would assist nature, subtly hastening the demise of her nominees through means that were impossible to trace. While never proven in a court of law, her story became a cautionary tale, a sensationalized embodiment of the moral rot at the heart of the tontine. It highlighted a terrifying reality. In this game, the most patient player wasn't necessarily the one who won, but perhaps the most ruthless.
How do you win a game where the house is the grave? You become the one who watches the watchers.
The tontine's influence spread far beyond the shores of Europe. It crossed the Atlantic and found fertile ground in the burgeoning United States. In the 19th century, American life insurance companies, looking for a competitive edge, began offering a modified version of the Tontine. These Tontine-style policies were wildly popular. They combined a life insurance policy with a speculative investment, promising massive deferred dividends to policyholders who survived a certain period, typically 20 years. For millions of Americans, it was their first real foray into the world of investing. Companies like the Equitable Life Assurance Society grew into financial juggernauts, building lavish skyscrapers that dominated the New York City skyline, monuments to the immense wealth generated by these schemes. However, the American experiment with the Tontine was plagued by scandal and corruption. The huge pools of capital accumulated by the insurance companies were a source of immense temptation. Executives engaged in rampant speculation, cronyism, and outright embezzlement. They used policyholder funds as their personal slush funds, investing in risky ventures and paying themselves exorbitant salaries. The promised massive dividends often failed to materialize, shrinking dramatically by the time the payout period arrived. Policyholders who had paid their premiums faithfully for 2 decades felt cheated and betrayed. Public outrage grew, fueled by sensational newspaper exposes that detailed the lavish lifestyles of insurance executives, all paid for with the savings of ordinary families. The tipping point came in 1905 with the Armstrong investigation in New York. This landmark legislative inquiry, led by Senator William Armstrong and his brilliant chief counsel, Charles Evans Hughes, pulled back the curtain on the widespread corruption within the insurance industry. The investigation's public hearings were a national sensation. Day after day, newspapers ran shocking headlines as top insurance executives were forced to testify under oath, revealing a cesspool of financial malpractice. The investigation exposed how the Tontine system had created enormous, unregulated pools of money that had inevitably corrupted those in charge. The fallout from the Armstrong investigation was swift and decisive. In its wake, a wave of new laws and regulations was passed, fundamentally reshaping the American financial landscape.
You think the lottery ended in 1850? Look at your pension. Look at your Social Security number.
Tontine-style insurance policies were outlawed. Stricter rules were imposed on how insurance companies could invest their capital, and new standards of transparency and accountability were established to protect consumers. The era of the Tontine, at least in its popular, high-risk form, had come to an abrupt and dramatic end. The system, once hailed as a financial marvel, was now condemned as an invitation to fraud and a moral hazard. Its name became synonymous with greed and corruption, a relic of a more reckless financial age. So, the next time you hear about a revolutionary new investment plan that seems too good to be true, remember the chilling story of the Tontine. It's a powerful reminder that when vast sums of money are at stake, the line between profit and peril, between investment and incentive for the unthinkable, can become terrifyingly thin. It stands as a dark monument in financial history, a testament to the enduring power of human greed and the grim consequences that can follow.
Insurance is a mirror. It shows us that when money and mortality meet, the mirror always cracks. Until next time, stay alive.
Thank you for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as I did, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more dives into the dark corners of history.